What you see in me dazzles me, dazes me.
Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with jazz singer, musician, composer, and producer Roberta Donnay. We talked about her latest 2022 album called Blossoming in honor of the work of Blossom Dearie. She has released 9 studio albums and has shared the stage with the likes of Booker T. Jones, Dr. John, Elvis Costello, Leon Russell, Michael McDonald, Neil Young, and so many others. She grew up in Washington, D.C. and learned to sing from the radio. She began singing professionally at 16, and she's never stopped. We get into this and so much more. Enjoy.
Hi, Roberta. It's Joe Domino with Neon Jazz Radio in Kansas City.
Hi, Joe.
How are you today?
I'm okay. How are you?
Excellent. Nice to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute out for the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet. So before we get into your latest album, Blossoming, I want to kind of cover COVID. You know, it really did a big number on artists, especially the jazz community. I'm wondering how you survived it now that, you know, the world's waking up, you got a new album out, and how it's changed the way that you approach things.
Okay, that's a big question. Well, I was very fortunate in that my partner and I had a film, a documentary film that we were given to score, and we have a studio here in our home. So a lot of COVID, I was actually working as a composer on a film and working on some other projects, as a songwriter, which I used to be a full-time songwriter. So working in that capacity and of course missing being out there in public and performing, we just didn't know what was going to happen. So I felt like, the whole time I need to use as preparation to prepare for the next phase, whatever that was going to be. And I spent a lot of my time in my spiritual practice and really trusting the universe that people were going to be okay around me. So I spent a lot of time chanting Nami Horengekyo. I spent a lot of time studying and a lot of time preparing. I took voice lessons, which I haven't taken in 20 years, I think. And, meeting with friends online, a lot of Zoom with cousins and family and friends. And that's basically what I did. And then this album came out of that. It came out of wanting to do a new project that was in a different arena of my singing, because I had been doing the Prohibition mob band for the previous 3 records. And so since 2011, I was just concentrating on the 1920s and 30s. And I was singing with other composers. At one point, I did a project with Bob Giroux, and a producer in New York had recorded us together doing 5 songs. And Bob was playing piano. It was just me and him. He was singing, and I was singing with him. And as we were working on that project, I thought about it. I realized that 3 of the songs he had done previously with Blossom Dearie, they were really close friends. And they sang, they worked together, sang together, they toured together a little bit. So, it got me thinking maybe I should listen to more Blossom Dearie. And of course I love Blossom Dearie. And I had seen her live when she was still around. And that's where this project came from.
So talk to me a little bit about kind of the overall feeling. For so long, the world couldn't perform live. Things were turned upside down. How relieving is it now to have this album out and the chance to celebrate Blossom? And just in general, how does it feel?
I'm an entertainer besides being a singer. And so not being around people was, for a lot of people, including me, just really painful, incredibly painful. And I would wake up thinking, who am I? Do I have a purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? And so it is completely relieving I ended up performing a little bit through COVID. I did a couple of outdoor concerts, and every time I did that, it was unbelievable high, unbelievably happy moment. And the audience was, just like me. The audience connection is very strong, and they wanted the same thing I did. So it was like a huge celebration whenever we got to do this. And now I feel like every moment is, a blessing. Every moment is a great opportunity for us to be happy, celebrate life.
Yeah, for sure. So ultimately, with this album, what are you hoping the audience gets from it?
Love. It's an album of that. That was the only thing I really wanted to accomplish was a feeling of love and connection, because I feel like people were really needing love during that whole time. And it became very clear to me that, music can bring that message in many different ways. But with these songs, I picked them. There's 16 songs on this record, and every one of them I picked actually first because of the melody, because as a child I connected first with melody, and then secondly with lyrics. So it had to hit me in both ways. There's hundreds of songs that she recorded. So, and I wanted to do some in French because she lived in Paris and she sang in French sometimes. And so two of the songs she co-wrote. And so that was the other thing. I wanted to do songs that were close to her heart, not knowing her, not being able to call her and ask her, what should I do, So not every song on here people have heard before, because like Moonlight Savings Time and let's see, what else is on here? Some of the songs I don't think people have necessarily heard. I think they've heard The Party's Over. I think they've heard Someone to Watch Over Me. I don't think they've heard Spring in Manhattan. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I went with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you grew up in D.C. You started at 16. You obviously had it in your bloodstream, so to speak. The jazz was your world. You're very swayed. Talk to me a little bit about how all this began for you. How did jazz become your focal point and the life that you live now?
Wow. Well, just like you said, I grew up with a family who had some jazz records, and I listened to George Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue. That was my favorite record. And every time I heard somebody like Louis Armstrong or Billie Holiday or Ella Fitzgerald, anytime I heard someone singing this music, I just went into rapture, It just hit me. And so I incessantly, as a kid, and when I was on my own, started buying jazz records and blues records and studying the artists and the history. And, and I grew up in D.C. And I thought I was, growing up as a little tiny kid, I thought I was a boy. I had memory of past lives, and I thought I was black, because that was the culture and the music that I loved and what was around me. But then I found out that, in fact, I was a girl, which was incredibly disappointing to me at the time. And then I found out I was white, which was way worse, much worse. So I got used to being a girl in this life, but I still have not really gotten over being a white person. So, I don't sound like I grew up in the hood, but actually I did kind of grow up in the hood. And, I had a very tumultuous beginning, and I ran away from home. So by the time I was singing and making a living, I'd already run away. I was on my own. I was working by age 14, and I was really on my own by 16.
Wow. So what was the first live jazz show that you ever witnessed that really just blew you away?
Wow. Well, I have to say it was probably a blues show first. I had some friends in the city I would go out with, and there was this incredible guitar player named Roy Buchanan, and he was so celebrated, but he had such an ego. He was an amazing guitarist, but he had such an ego that he would actually turn around when he took a solo. He could only see his back, because he didn't want people to steal his licks, which is so amazingly funny to me because people can't steal your licks from just watching you, you know. But in his head, he thought that. So, yeah, I saw him as a teenager, and I saw, I went to Mr. Henry's, and I saw various jazz musicians. Nobody famous, except I did go to Harold's Rogan Jar, which was an after-hours club in D.C., and all the musicians who would come into town on tour would go there after their gig. So, like at midnight, it would start and go till 4 a.m, and there'd be a jam session. So I would stand outside because they didn't actually let white people in the club, and I would stand outside until the guy at the door goes like, all right, go sit in the back and don't let them see you. And so I know I heard Tommy Flanagan on piano, and I heard all kinds of incredible musicians. I didn't know their names. Their names weren't on the board or anything, And, yeah. And as a young person, I met Richie Cole, and he introduced me to a lot of people.
Yeah, Richie's one of my favorite people ever. That's an interview that I'll never forget. I actually got to speak to him a few times, and he was definitely one of the coolest guys out there.
What a character.
Oh, man. Yeah, immediately you get that. So, you've been fortunate in your life to be around a lot of, legends, luminaries, famous musicians. What did you learn from them? What did they teach you about the craft? What ultimately helped you and resonated through you throughout your career?
Well, I guess number one, their dedication to their art. When I moved to San Francisco, I was really kind of raised by jazz musicians. I married a jazz musician who was much older than me, and one of the first gigs I had in San Francisco was with Dick Oxtott's Golden Age Jazz Band. These guys were all over 60. And Dick Oxtott would say to me, "You can't sing this song. You're too young." It's like I wanted to sing "I Want a Hot Dog for My Roll" by Butterbeans and Susie. I don't know if you know that record, but it's a really funny song, really great song. And anyway, he would pick songs for me, and those guys, would talk to me a lot. And then the people around my husband, he was playing with Mark Murphy. He played with Bobby McFerrin before Bobby McFerrin went solo. And, he played with a whole lot of jazz musicians. And so I was constantly surrounded by great musicians. And, and of course, when I started, I was playing guitar and I was a songwriter. And so I couldn't actually play the chords. I got the Mickey Baker book. It took me about 6 months and just crying every day because my hand was too small to reach those chords, to make those chords. And I was just really devastated. But over time, just being surrounded by that, I, of course, learned a bunch of jazz standards. I learned standards as a kid, and I had probably 200 songs, by the time I was 6. I knew them by heart. And so if there was an opportunity to sing, I would just, put myself on stage to sing, and they never threw me off stage. That was the weird thing. Like even in Washington D.C., I'd go to a jam session, right? And on the East Coast, if you get up on stage and you're not a great musician, they'll ask you to leave. They'll say, "See ya," get off the stage. And I remember one night I was walking up to the crowd, and I was the only white person in this room, and they were laughing at me. They were like, "What's that girl going to do? What's she going to do?" And I got up on stage and called a tune. I did a Billie Holiday tune called "Fine and Mellow," which was a real, I would always just pick a blues song because it was easy and didn't need a chart. And the minute I started singing, they all got very quiet and clapped. So I was very encouraged by the musicians around me, and they were the ones who ended up really pushing me in my career.
So in this career that you've had, what do you like the best about it? You know, there's so many aspects that go in, from live music to recording to promoting, all of these things in between. What did you like the best about being a professional musician?
I think, well, the music. You know, I can't tell you. It's obviously not the business. You know, it's not booking gigs or writing contracts or. I like the fact that I can hire other musicians. I love the fact that I can give people work when I get work. If I'm a headliner and I've had, got to hire, a 6-piece band or a 10-piece band or a bunch of horn players or whatever. I mean, I love that idea that I can give people work as a singer. But it's mostly, and I don't really honestly care if I'm a side person. I love singing with Dan Hicks and Hot Licks. I did that for 10 and a half years. And I just love, supporting him. I love being on stage doing his music. Of course, his music was crazy good, crazy good music. I was never bored. We could do the same songs every night, which we didn't, but I was never bored, not one moment. So I feel very, very lucky.
So if you could get into a Jazz DeLorean time machine, so to speak, and go back in time and see a dream gig that you never got the chance to see, where are you going? Who are you going to see?
Definitely Billie Holiday. Definitely Billie Holiday. And I don't know, Cafe Society in New York City in the 1940s, when she first sang Strange Fruit. I know she did it in that club. And but any jazz performance that she was in the earlier years, also Thelonious Monk and I don't know, all the innovators of jazz, John Coltrane and Bird and anybody who is an innovator is who I wanted to see.
Yeah.
Wayne Shorter I got to see, and Herbie Hancock I've gotten to see quite a few what I call innovators who, for me, of Abbey Lincoln, I would always go see Abbey Lincoln if she was in town, if I had a chance. She was absolutely my favorite singer who was still alive that I got to see. And, anybody who was a writer, Bob Dorough, a composer. Composers are very, very huge in my life. And I've studied, film composing. And even though I can't read, I can read music, but I don't have that education. I never got a chance to go to music school. So if I actually was able to go back in time, I would take piano lessons as a kid and go to, Berklee School of Music or whatever.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained through living through your life. What would you tell that younger version?
I would tell her to try to get into college that had music. I would just tell her, please go. My dream as a kid, I was able to finish high school. That was huge because I was a runaway and I was on my own. So, that was huge. I was always working. I always had to have a job. So the thought of going to college, that was for rich kids. That was for kids that got scholarships and all that. I was a very, very, very smart kid, actually, and I was in the top 1% of my class. But when they came to giving out scholarships, they decided that year to give it to minorities, and I was very happy to hear that. But then I didn't get the scholarship, so I wasn't really able to go. But I really believe that education is the number one key thing that we can give kids, and I wish we could give it for free to every single young person, because, when you're young, you can really grasp things like language, like music. You can grasp things that when you're older, you're a little slower and maybe you can't remember stuff, but yeah, I would definitely give that young girl education and give her piano lessons and teach her composition orchestration.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
So, if I could give advice to my younger self?
Yes.
Oh, man. I've never really even delved that much into it, but I would probably just say start what I'm doing now earlier on. But at the same time, there's a part of me that watches Quantum Leap and realizes what kind of wheel I could spin that may go in a direction I don't want it to go. So there's a part of me that had to kind of see a level of journalism that made me gravitate towards the jazz community, which I find to be the finest group of humans on this planet. And there's a part of me that would love to have started that earlier on, to have more of a library, but at the same time, I'm glad that I got to see what I saw leading up to it. So,
thank you for sharing that. When you said that, I thought of humanism. Being human is probably the number one lesson I've learned in jazz community. And the musicians that talk about that. Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter wrote a letter to. It's called A Letter to Future Artists. And I just shared that in my newsletter. I'll send it to you if you want. But it talks about humanity, being a human and as an artist, not letting your ego get in the way and all kinds of things like that, and really looking at the world from a positive point of view, that you have the power to change things around you. So I think as young people, we really need to know that.
Absolutely.
We really need to have. We need to know how much power we actually have and not the opposite.
For sure.
And that all ideas are valid. And, but yeah, teaching somebody to be a human is probably the biggest. That's why I really admire teachers and educators and people that are out there fighting for the people,
Well, the one thing that's key to Wayne and Herbie is that they love jazz. And my next question to you is, why do you love jazz?
Well, I guess I love jazz because I am jazz. I don't know how to separate the music from who I am. It's just one and the same. It's the love of jazz that made me an artist. I mean, it's the love of music that kept me alive. That was my one string to maybe I can make it as a person in terms of staying alive. It kept me away from drugs. Kept me very, very straight and focused. And the dream of becoming an artist, which I thought was impossible. I thought I could be a songwriter, but I didn't think I could be a singer. I didn't think I was a good enough singer because when I listened to my voice, I was listening to Sarah Vaughan and all these gorgeous voices, Nina Simone. And then when I recorded demos of my songs to bring to LA, I mean, I thought I heard this high squeaky voice and it sounded like Minnie Mouse to me. So I didn't think there was a career there. And, and then I would go to LA with my songs, my suitcase of songs. And when I played them for people, they'd be like, who's the singer? We like the song, but who's the singer? I say, I don't know. Some chick. I really didn't really hear my own voice, and I think that's true for a lot of young women. A lot of young people don't hear their own voice. And so I didn't value, I loved singing, and I thought, when I look back on my life later, I was like, oh my goodness, I made more money as a singer than anything, but I couldn't in my head get like, oh, they want your voice. So it took a really long time.
Well, and speaking of taking a long time, let's kind of get to a place here where we get to know you a little bit better. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, but ultimately you live your life. You have a perception of yourself. Who do you think you are?
That reminds me of a line I used to say to people don't you know who I think I am? Like, that's my answer.
Right.
So that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, on the outside, when I'm on stage, I don't know, I'm kind of funny. I'm it's kind of a, what you said, improv, you know, when I'm talking to audiences, and I'm kind of a comedian. I don't know how that happened. I didn't practice it. I didn't study it, but I turned out to be kind of funny. So, you know, what people see on the outside is probably I'm really funny and kind of goofy, you know, maybe a little spaced out. But to me, inside, I'm deadly serious. You know, I'm more serious and completely, you know, liberal in my thinking. And I want everybody to love each other. You know, I want to be like we're living in the 60s, you know, where people really worked on that. People really thought about humanity, and that's what I think about.
So if anyone wants to pick up the brand new album, learn more about any live shows, anything pertaining to your world, where's the best place for them to go?
They can go to Spotify if they're downloading. They can go to Apple Music. It's everywhere that I can think of. It's on my website, which is robertadonnay.com. Donnay, like Chardonnay. It's on CD Baby. It's on Amazon. And hopefully they'll come to a live show and pick it up in person, because I have them with me wherever I go. And you guys are in Kansas City, right?
Yes, Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, I'd love to come to Kansas City.
We'd love to have you here. Yeah. It's been pretty fun here lately with, you know, just the sports have been doing good, winning the Super Bowl, the World Cup's coming, the NFL draft's going to be here in a few weeks. It's kind of weird to see how many big things are actually happening here in Kansas City, but it's great. Great town.
Congratulations. Yeah, the last time I was in Kansas City was with Dan Hicks on tour.
Oh,
and,
cool.
We played a bunch of festivals in the area, and we also played a really fun club downtown, which I'm forgetting the name of, but I'm sure you know it, and I hope it's still there. You know, we did lose a lot of venues during COVID, and that was a huge thing for the musicians, for us, you know.
Yeah.
Being worried not just about ourselves, but about all the venues. So I really appreciate when people go out and support live music, and whatever it is. You know, it could be any kind of live music. But I'm just thrilled when people go out and want to hear music. So thank you so much, you guys, for doing that, and for listening to radio, because radio is actually the reason I started singing. I taught myself to sing off the radio.
That's wonderful.
So what you do is huge. And actually, Dan Hicks wanted to be a radio person. He studied broadcasting in school. Yeah, we're all radio fans, all of us.
Well, it's funny because whenever I talk to musicians, they always talk about following my interviews, and sometimes I feel like I'm in a vacuum, and it's like two or three people. It's like me and the bird flying by that hears it, but there's a lot more people out there listening, so it's good. I'm glad that that there's an audience and people are enjoying it, so it's wonderful for sure. Roberta, it was great to meet you. Thank you for opening up. Best of luck with the album and everything as we move forward.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to check out your show.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers and minds in Washington, D.C., Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Roberta for her time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, you can find Neon Jazz interviews on Apple Podcast or Spotify. You can subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
But to see me in your eyes, it just amazes me.
Neon Jazz.